Okay, we are good.
So, thank you. And for those that are joining us on YouTube, if there are any, um, we're just getting started on the Riverton Task Force um, committee meeting. We're waiting for a couple of other legislators to join to have an official quorum. But I think for the purpose of where we're at right now, I think we'll get an update as soon as we can from Director McComey on everything that's taken place over the last month with the state building commission. Maybe Suzanne will do that. However, you'd like to do that, Director McComey, um, and then maybe have Andrew just fill any gaps we've got there, and then we're really are interested in what um, uh, where we're at in finalizing. I think we're looking at some geotech and some other stuff that we've started to before we finish all the paperwork. But if we can just get a feel for what the outlying needs or things that need to be completed before we finish everything up, that'd be helpful too. So until then, I think
Representative Larson?
yes.
I do believe you have a quorum if you would like to call the roll. And I think Catherine might have some introductory comments just to bring the members up to speed on some new appointments and some legislation as well.
That'd be great. With your blessing, Bob and I'll kind of run the show then today, unless we have a chairman show up. And Catherine, would you go ahead and do a roll call, please? Morning, Senator Driscoll.
Good morning. Sorry, I'm in California. I was going to ditch you and I should have called. My apologies.
Good morning, members of the task force. Kathleen Camerati, Budget Fiscal. Senator Driscoll.
Present.
Senator Salazar.
Excused.
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Nicholas.
Here.
Director McComey.
Here.
Administrator Gordy.
Here.
Administrator Moffat.
Here.
Administrator Maury.
Here.
Mr. Waldock.
Excused.
Co-Chairman Hicks.
Excused.
Co-Chairman Oakley.
Excused.
I believe we have decorum.
Thank you. So Catherine, if you'd lead us into this, and then we'll, from there, we'll go right to you, Director McComey, please.
All right. Good morning, members of the task force. Kathleen Camerati, Budget Fiscal. I'm joined with Budget Fiscal Administrator Don Richards for the April 26 Riverton Task Force meeting. First, we have two new faces to the task force, Director McComey, who is replacing Director Vincent from the State Construction Department, and Christy Gordy for the Department of Family Services, who is replacing Edwin Heimer. The last time the task force met was on October 6, 2023 via Zoom, where the task force discussed and created a summary of principles for property and real estate acquisition to be circulated at the next SBC State Building Commission meeting, which occurred on October 11th. This was also the last SBC meeting before the start of session. At the commission meeting, Chairman Oakley and Hicks, I believe both of them were present and provided testimony for the task force and worked with the executive branch to kind of get them up to speed and about the work of the task force and answer any questions that they may have had. Going into session, after that meeting, there were a few attempts to fund the task force, mainly a motion during the markup period of the budget by the JAC to appropriate $8 million of civil funds for the renovation of the upper interior of the building, and that motion did pass. This appropriation was then included in House Bill 135. We also know it as the Capital Construction Bill, which did not go into introduction. Later during session, capital construction was reintroduced into the budget bill by the second JCC conference, and what was included was the reappropriation of 2.5 million of unexpended, unobligated funds to the State Construction Department for purposes of the Riverton State Office Building Renovation Project. And these funds were from the 2023 general session. So we do have the carryover appropriations available. And as of yesterday afternoon, when I checked, this was about 2.45 million. During this month, on April 10th, the SBC met once again. LSO, SCD, and the Department of A&I were in attendance and acted as liaisons for the task force, where the State Building Commission passed 2 motions. The first was the approval of the acquisition of 877 North 8th Street West, or we know it as the U.S. Energy Building, pending satisfactory due diligence, inspection, and negotiation with up to 2 million SBC contingency funds. And further moved, the SCD is authorized to move forward with the basic first order renovations as authorized by the budget bill that was just passed. The second motion was to approve the acquisitions of lots 1, 2, and 3 of 0000 West Sunset Drive in Riverton from SBC contingency funds at an amount aligned with the fair market value. I might share my screen here. For some additional information for the task force, the SCD provided their financial reports at the last SBC meeting, and this included the appropriations, encumbrances, expenditures, and the unexpended balance for both the SBC contingency and SBC flex contingency funds. The SBC contingency appropriations have an unexpended balance of about 6.6 million and a flex unexpended balance of 12.3 million. But what that didn't include was an appropriation of 17 million in SIPA funds that was just passed for SBC contingency funds in the last session. And it also does not take out the 2 million that was authorized for the purchase of the building during the SBC or the purchase of the lots or any other amounts that were approved for property acquisition at the last SBC. So there's some contingency funds available, and I'm sure SCD could provide some more information on that. And lastly, just a bit of housekeeping. The task force is required to provide interim reports on the activities of the task force to the JAC by November 1st of each year the task force is in existence. And I will ask Dawn if I missed anything.
Mr. Richards?
I think that provides an overview. As indicated, or to highlight Catherine's comments, this task force provided principles of suggestion to the State Building Commission, and they did act on those, and those acquisitions are in process. They're going to, as I understand it, use their own funds for the acquisition, and that leaves about $2.45 million of the appropriation for renovation. And should SBC wish to, that's their call, not the authorization of the task force, they do have access to funds within their contingency, about $6 million plus the 17 million appropriated, which would bring it up to 23, but then deducted from that is any property acquisitions, including these acquisitions, and I believe there may be other acquisitions contemplated unrelated to Riverton.
Correct. And so in that $6.6 million is the 2.45 as well. Is that not correct, Don?
Acting Chairman Larson, no, those are separate. So the 2.45 really is under the purview of this task force for purposes of recommendation to use as you wish. And then the 6.6 million is under the explicit purview of the SBC.
So let's make sure that I'm clear on that. So if you would, with the footnote in the budget bill on the 2.45, it appropriated or authorized the use of that 2.45 for further to proceed on the renovation. But do we then recommend what that is, or has that money gone to the state construction department and they move forward, or do we need to give them guidance? Can you provide us with some how you see that?
Yes, Acting Chair Larson, the funds are available to the state construction department. They're in their possession, if you will. However, the authorizing legislation of the Riverton Task Force provides an avenue for this group to recommend how those funds may be expended. So they actually have ownership of the funds, but you have a consultation and recommendation aspect of this task force for the expenditure, and it can be used, those funds can be used for renovation purposes.
And due diligence.
Yes.
Okay.
So just to follow up on that, Don, if we make a recommendation, does that go to SBC, or is there just a determination by state construction department?
I believe it goes to SBC under the task force requirements.
And when's the next time that SBC would consider it?
Acting Chair Nicholas, that would be July 10th.
And so if we wanted to then do more than two, or if what we do requires a contract for more than 2.5, then that's something we need to put together between now and July 10th or 11th for part of that 6 million. Would that be fair?
Representative Nicholas, I believe it would, and let me offer 2 points. That July 10th meeting is important for two aspects. Number one, that's the next formal opportunity the SBC has to authorize explicit use of the State Building Commission contingency funds, if they so desire to use any. Additionally, that is the traditional meeting where the SBC provides recommendations for additional appropriations that would appear in any governor's supplemental budget request. So if there is a desire on SBC or this task force to either increase SBC's contingency or to provide a explicit appropriation for renovation activities that are higher cost than the 2.45 million currently available. I'm just providing an example. If you identify that maybe some HVAC and ADA requirements are necessary prior to full occupancy of the building, the SBC could make such a recommendation to the governor at that time. This is the earliest time that is available. And of course, for the legislators who are members of this task force, you all know that a SBC recommendation is not a requirement for any future appropriation for contingency funds or specified funds for a project such as this. The governor could add that unilaterally, or the Joint Appropriations Committee or the House or Senate floor could also add that in the 2025 general session.
And so, Dell, as you present to us, I think it'd be helpful to work with that time frame on what we may need to do. And then Don, if it goes to the SBC on 7/11, they usually require, at least 10 days notice, I believe, or something like that so that they can have it in front of it, analyze it before the meetings.
Yeah, I think that goes through Suzanne, Chairman Nicholas.
Yeah.
And so she can kind of keep us a line on that. So Director McComey, we're going to shift gears over to you, and then if you could kind of help us understand what due diligence requirements are out there and are being completed right now, and with those anticipated costs, and then if you could also kind of help us prioritize initial things that need to be addressed that we would perhaps be considering the use of the 2.45 million on, and then maybe next steps or next actions on the building that we would need to do that may warrant a request from SBC to into some of their contingency funds. And on top of that, a request that we would maybe want to have the governor provide in his supplemental budget. And so there's 3 or 4 steps there along the way. I hope that makes sense. And Andrew, we'll need you to chime in here too as we consider how we prepare to move the various agencies into that building as we determine. So Dell, could we turn the time over to you and Dave and the gang? Suzanne, please.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd just like to note that sometime over the evening, I think your LSO staff got a hold of my notes because they basically filled you in on the front end of this on what I was going to kind of talk about. So they did a really good job. So that'll cut my presentation a little bit short. But right now, we've gone out and Andrew can weigh in on this when his presentation comes up. But we've gone out and extended the extension to buy the property to May 1st. And we've reached out, and I think the contract is on its way back out to extend that for another 90 days while we continue to work through the due diligence on the property. And we've had those discussions with the owner. In regard to the 3 lots north of the site, the 13.85 acres, when we went out to make contact on the purchase of those and try and negotiate that land has already been purchased. So somebody else has bought it in the meantime. And again, I think Andrew could give a little more detail probably on that. Currently, we're sitting at about 2.462 million remaining of the 2.5. We've contracted out for $2,500 to do the structural evaluation, and that was done, I believe, on Tuesday. We have $10,000 for the geotech work, and that was done Wednesday. And so the feedback that we've heard from our structural engineer is the building is really sound. He was impressed on how it was originally constructed. And again, I hadn't heard back on the geotech yet, but I do have Jake available. Jake is our project manager for the CM department that's working on the Riverton office work, and he has a presentation to do on the level 1, level 2, and also to fill us in on the evaluations for the due diligence that's been done so far. Jake is an architect, and he's also been a building contractor for many years, so he has a good background in this. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, unless there's any questions, we could have Jake kind of weigh in on this, or we could wait till the part of the agenda that had the level 1, level 2 discussion and go into more detail there.
No, so Jake, as we go through this, really, I think what we're interested in as we contemplate how we move forward on this is we got two pieces of the due diligence done, the structural. We're waiting on the report on the geotech. Could you share with us what other outstanding due diligence is done, and then also what the conversation is on the monument that's there, on how we're going to get rid of that, and is that the responsibility of the owner? And then I guess my other question is, if those lots were already purchased, when did that sale take place? And when did we just sit too long and not inquire on that? Did we just miss the boat? Jake, you're up.
Oh, thank you, Chairman Larson. I appreciate it. As far as the sale of the land goes, I would defer that to Administrator Coleman. I know they've been kind of working that area. What I can do is show you the due diligence and the reports that we've gotten back on the properties. Catherine, am I okay to share my screen real quick?
Yes.
Can everybody see this okay?
Yes.
Okay. So what we have here is the first step that we needed to do was to get a survey done, as we discussed. We hired a local engineer, Apex Surveying out of Riverton, to track the deed history, the property plots, all the utilities and everything on the existing property that we see here. This would be the building. This is what you were talking about right here, Chairman Larson, is the is kind of
Right.
the abandoned pond and mine elevator shaft.
Elevator bid, yes. Yeah.
Okay, let me see something real quick. So I apologize, Suzanne. I'm trying to.
It's okay.
So this would be the 14-acre property that we kind of been discussing. The full site survey took a little bit of time, considering we started this in the middle of winter time, and they had to be able to get some of the snow cleared, which is why it took a little bit of time to get this done. We did have, as Director McComey stated, we did have geotech done this Wednesday. So these are the bore locations that we kind of came up with that we thought would be the important portions of this property to get examined in the existing asphalt parking lot, just adjacent to it. And then these would be what's considered the ag use areas right now. But the nice thing about this this property was originally set up in the 1980s to be 3 individual lots. And with that being said, the city actually had a easement that ran down here where they would extend the road and literally divide this into 3 individual properties and lots, and all the storm utilities, the stormwater, the sewer, everything set up to service both of these areas in addition to the existing property. We still have currently, the city has an easement on both sides of 8th Street and this city road right here that sits back a little bit, about 20 to 25 feet. That's a utility corridor. They do have an irrigation easement right here, which if there was future development, the surveyors recommended potentially putting that into a culvert. It's a pedestrian and irrigation, but it's not wide enough to really serve anything. So it'd be easily encased. The city has an abandoned easement that ran through, which would have been a city street. And then it would have divided these individual properties that actually was abandoned in 1985. And the engineers are currently working with the city of Riverton to get that reverted back to the deeded owners, because right now it's just kind of out there, and the city didn't even realize it, so they're working on getting their easement back to the deeded owners, so it'd still be a portion of this property. Like I was saying, on this survey specifically, the fact that it was set up to be 3 individual lots really sets up nicely if there would be future expansion necessary on this property. So we have the existing building, you have the entrance off of this street, and you have the entrance off of 8th Street with all the utilities running in that same kind of area where it would set up for future expansion. And that was one of the things that we were looking at. If you purchase this property, we have all this extra area, what do we do with it? Well, you have potential for a future expansion, a storage building for equipment, whatever you would necessarily need with this property. So it does set up pretty nicely that way. Director McComey touched on it. We did have the drilling for the geotech happen Wednesday. We should be expecting a report back in the next week. We had Lower and Associates, Bob Lower, structural engineer out of Casper,
Yeah.
go and visit the site and do a structural evaluation. And as Director McComey said, he was very impressed with the construction of the building. We, as you know, the construction management division went and visually inspected and did a full building assessment. If you remember back in June of last year, I believe.
Correct.
And we didn't see anything. And we just had that finally verified that it is a very structural sound building. He was actually very impressed with the construction. He went through the basement parking garage, as he was telling Mr. Webb and I, that there was literally no cracks in any of the expansion joints. Every 21 feet, they had an expansion joint in that parking garage basement. And in his words, he wants to know what the sub base was because that thing's bulletproof. He said the structural timbers and beams on the second floor are very sound. We had another project manager from the CMD with him. There's some minor tuck pointing that may have to happen around the bricks, but we noticed that ourselves and we looked at it. The roof is been replaced in the last 4 or 5 years. Everything, there was no water infiltration. Everything was very, very solid from that. So all we're waiting for right now is the last piece, which would be the geotech.
So Jake, those are the only components of due diligence that we had was the structural and then the geotech. We're not waiting on anything else.
Correct, sir. And we should have the structural report this week.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And then, so Director McComey, once we get that done, why there's nothing that limits us to getting the contract completed before the 90 days. It's just that we've give ourselves some extra time. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
So if everything goes well on with the geotech report, would you contemplate that could happen sooner than later?
Yes. Yep, I've been working with Andrew, and that's our plan right now, is move forward as quickly as possible as soon as we get the information.
So help me, Andrew, I'll shift gears to you. If you would just, anything that you'd like to add to what Director McComey and Jake's done, and then could you share with us whose court that ball, the contract for purchase, whose court that's in? Is that yours or is that Department of Construction?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andrew Coleman with Department of Administration and Information. The purchase of the property will be in our court to handle that. Our intention is with the 90-day extension, we're working out with the owner to just keep moving forward on the contract. So we're not planning to wait or anything like that. But we figured the 90 days will make sure we have plenty of time to get all the paperwork finished. So that's our intention, is to move as fast as possible on that. Regarding the land to the north, there was a comment about that piece of it. Matt Simpson, our leasing manager, has been the one in coordination with the property owners, as well as he was contacted the realtors for the property to the north. And they informed us after the SBC meeting that the property had been sold prior to the SBC meeting, and we weren't aware of that. But that's what we know as far as what the sale was.
But we had requested that we inquire on the purchase of the property last year. Was that never done? Was it just done after this SBC meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I believe we contacted the realtor, the real estate realtors, as well as the owners of that land separately, and they referred us to the realtors. We had been in touch with them prior to the SBC meeting, I believe, but we weren't trying to move forward until we had SBC authorization, given that the building, the land without the building, we thought the land was probably secondary of I guess the priorities.
So have we reached out to the new owners to see if they're interested in selling?
We aren't sure who they are yet. We don't know who they are yet, but we can look into that.
Yeah, I think we want to follow up on that and and see what we can do. If you would, please. So then, Jake, Dale, and Andrew, in your visits with the owner, the current owner, is it his responsibility to get rid of that mine shaft elevator head?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think ANI has talked to them about that. I'm not sure what Mr. Trickling's looking into that has been.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, for the SCD, we have not had that discussion with the owner either.
Okay, I think that would be well to do, because I think that we had always contemplated that we're buying it, but we're not going to buy that head as well. We didn't want that to come with it. Maybe the task force can correct me, but I think that we had that discussion. Let's just make sure that doesn't slip through the cracks, and make that one of the if we can. I think, Bob, am I wrong here? You're muted. Can't hear you, Bob.
So
There you
I know we had the conversation about it. I don't know that we made that directive on the sale of the requirement as part of a purchase. You may recall that I was one of the single folks that thought we had to leave it there.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, I think Dave has a few comments on that.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I talked with Travis last time I was out there, and they said they were trying to sell that piece of equipment, and that they did have it on eBay for a while. He said that he doesn't even own that piece of equipment. It's a third party that owns that piece of equipment that's in that pond. So I think it'd behoove us to get with Travis and get the name of the person that owns that, to see what they're gonna do with that piece of equipment.
better yet. Yeah, I think that's great. So they've got a certain amount of time to have it gone, and that's wonderful. Unless that third party guy is Chairman Nicholas and he wants to leave it there. So
Just
Well, I'm guessing that whoever owns it is not going to move it at their own cost.
I think I would agree. I would agree with that, but I think that's pursue that. And I would just share with the committee, and Curtis, you're over there, and both Curtises are over there. That monument, the folks of Riverton, for a lot of them, really like it. So,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd never be able to figure out my way from the north end of Riverton over to the community college if I didn't have that as my landmarker.
I know. We all have our own tastes. So,
So maybe we can sell it to the people that bought the other 3 lots and move
There
it
you
over
go.
there.
build a fishing pond there.
So, Mr. Chairman, I noticed that Senator Hicks has joined us.
Oh, hi, Chairman Hicks. Do you want to drive the bus?
You're just doing such an outstanding job, Representative Larson. I'll just let you keep running the show.
Okay, well, thank you. Crack the whip when you need to. So then I think we're at the point then, Andrew and Dale, and who we understand the due diligence, and we understand what we're doing to get the contract completed and that acquisition finalized. What are first steps that you would anticipate using the $2.4 million for? Can you start and then how far would that go? What are some reasonable reasonable requests that we might need to consider for SBC on some additional funding to get us going, and then the overall completion of the renovation to where we can get all of what's the plan, I guess, is what I would ask Dale.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask Jake to weigh back in on this. We've actually done some analysis on what it would cost for the level 1, level 2 design fees, the level 3 design fees, and then the allocation then of the remaining funding for construction contingency out of the 2.5 and what work we would contemplate on that. And then I think then that leads us to the larger discussion of where would the task force like to move beyond what we have for the funding for the 2.5. So Jake, if you would go ahead and pull that information, that sheet up, that kind of work that talks to those issues, and walk the committee through that.
Yes, yes, sir. Let me do that real quick. So Representative Larson, do I still call you co-chair Larson now that Senator Hicks is here?
You could call me Lloyd.
Okay. What we took a look at from an SCD standpoint was what were the immediate needs right now. We know that we're going to have to do, well, this is just our assumptions, of course, sir. We're assuming that we would have to do some ADA bathroom remodels, some life safety remodels to the existing building, some ADA upgrades to the suites for them to meet life safety. So we started from there and put together kind of a budget or an estimate, I should say, a preconceptual estimate of what the total cost would be immediately. We also took a look at the level 1, level 2 design fees, and Suzanne, please feel free to jump in if there's something I'm missing here, but or Dave, because we all worked on this, sir. We're looking at the level 1, level 2 design for the entire building and site. That's what we would recommend doing first, doing a level 1, level 2 study, because what we're seeing and what we're looking at and what we're evaluating might be completely different when we bring in, professional architects and engineers, and what they would do during the reconnaissance study, the level 1 reconnaissance study and the level 2 feasibility study, is they would look at everything. They would look at all the mechanical issues, or not issues, but all the existing mechanical, the existing electrical, the existing plumbing, and they would create a priority list. And based off of that priority list, it may be something that we didn't see as a priority, but the professionals are seeing as a priority. So the first step would be to do a level 1, level 2 of the entire building and a site, almost a master plan, basically, but really concentrate on the building and what we need to address. The level 3 design fees would be for the immediate needs only. That would be to bring the building up to current ADA standards, maintenance any of the mechanical or electrical that would need to be maintenance to extend the life of the existing equipment, and to address any ADA needs. We know we're looking at the bathrooms. They need to probably be redone to bring up to current ADA standards. Life safety, there's some corridors that don't quite meet the life safety standards. These are all things that could be fixed right away. So with that being said, the budget that we came up with total right now would be in that 1.98588 range, sir, which would be the portion that we would say that we're recommending be done immediately after the purchase.
So Jake, a question that I have is on your immediate needs and renovation up there on mostly on the first floor, the bathrooms and that sort of stuff. Is that by chance anything that could wait until we get the level, the design studies done? Or is that something that we need to get done immediately while the design studies are being done?
I would say that it was something, they're obviously occupying this building now. I would have the level 1, level 2 design studies done first. And Suzanne, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, Suzanne Norton, Administrator of State Construction Department, Construction Management Division. This estimate here does assume that we are just doing the immediate needs now, and as we're occupying the building, these are not imminent. As long as other reasonable accommodation can be made for anyone who isn't able to navigate the ramps that don't quite meet current code and things like that. So we could proceed with the level 1 and 2 design and level 3 design for just immediate needs. However, if the task force would like to move other agencies out of lease space, eventually we would recommend that the task force consider requesting SBC approval of use of SBC contingency, or considering SCD to submit a CapCon request, assuming that our boss is amenable to a supplemental CapCon budget this year.
Well, I think so. If we could, for this conversation right now, that's just, and that summary is helpful, Suzanne, but just on this initial piece, the way I'm seeing it is we could do the level 1, level 2 studies. Jake, how long would it take to get that completed?
I would probably estimate for a full level 1, level 2 of the entire building. Suzanne, correct me if I'm wrong, we're probably in that 4 to 6 months range with procurement and advertising and everything.
If we're really quick and on top of it, yes.
Yeah.
So we're 4 to 6 months out from having that completed. Can we hold off on those immediate needs and renovation? I guess what I'm trying to do is not do put some money into some immediate needs and then redo them once we start in construction and renovation of the whole building. So if we could make those immediate needs comply with what the level 1, level 2, and level 3 design does, that seems to make more sense to me if that's not going to cause us a problem. So can you give us some direction there?
They're following in Riverton right now.
We would recommend, this is Suzanne Norton, we would recommend holding off on doing any work until we know the entirety of work that we want to do.
Okay.
Because once you begin construction, you have to bring everything up to current code.
So then with that, Suzanne, looking at Jake's spreadsheets, then we could take that 1.9 and deduct the 1.4 out of it.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay, and then once we had the level 1, level 2 study, then we could authorize immediate needs to be done, and that may or may not be separate from a renovation contract. Now, when if we're 4 to 6 months out, I'm trying to figure out what we need to do in making recommendations back to this SBC or a budget request. We had initial recommendations that a renovation price of around 12 million being we really went all out on it, and then we had a lesser amount of 8 million, if my memory serves me correct. Suzanne, are those still viable figures? And then what are we? It seems to me that we had some discussion on settling in on the 8 million. Are we missing the boat on doing that? So give us educate us on what those two, the differences between the two and what they do.
Mr. Chairman, I think that it might be helpful to request Jake open up some of those previous cost estimates that we shared for the option 2 and the option 3 renovations. I think that in those documents that were provided, maybe in September, there were inflation considerations shown for if it was funded in the legislative session 2025-26. I think the 8 million would be a little bit low. And, or if we wanted to do the full option 3, the 12 million would also be a little bit low. And I think that Jake had those figured.
Mr. Chairman, what Suzanne was just talking about, this was, if you remember, this was presented back in the I believe it was June 2023, and what we had for option 1, sir, was the $5.6 million option. That was some minimal renovations, that was some updating the finishes, that was doing some of the site work, and then the option 2, and as you see, that was 2023. That was early 2023 when we were working on that. So and the 2023 cost is 5.668 million. And then it shows an escalation of about, we're looking at about 4.8 to 5.2. So this is at about 5.5% inflation year over. The option 2 that you were talking about, sir, was the 8.9 option. That was more of a full remodel, mostly full remodel of the building with less of the site work. It includes some repairing of the existing parking lot, but it wasn't a full repaving job where we would mill the old asphalt and completely repave it, new curbs and gutters and everything. And that was at that 8.9. So now what we're saying, sir, is our estimate would be at about 9.4. Roughly. That was where we were there for 2024 costs. And then yes, sir.
Well, go ahead, and then I want to bring Chairman Nicholas in on the conversation.
Okay. And then the final option, which basically is what we were saying, was bringing this up to the standard and level of a state office building. This would be the full remodel of the building. It would include new windows. It would address the exterior of the bricks, just refurbishing the building to where you would have a building that would stand for another 50 years, reworking the whole entire parking lot and the site and everything. That was the 12.4 million. Now we're looking at about a little over 13, sir, in today's dollars, which is a year later. Because every year, as we're seeing, costs are increasing. So that's kind of where we're at, sir.
So a question then is, as we go into the level 1, level 2, level 3 studies, it's going to be helpful, is it not, for the architect to understand what agencies are going to be where and what their needs are? Would that be an accurate assumption?
Representative Larson, absolutely. I mean, that in accordance to a lot of other things. I mean, the first thing that the design team is going to do is they're going to, like I said, the level 1 is the reconnaissance, level 2 is feasibility. And so at that point, I mean, I know we already have kind of a conceptual plan that we had put together to show the different number of offices that we would be able to get out of that building. But yes, sir, knowing what agencies would go where would also be helpful, especially going into a level 3. But as an overall picture, sir, yes.
Okay, so Chairman Hicks and Chairman Nicholas, it appears to me that we're 6 months. So end of the year, we might have the studies done. And we would then want to be able to start engaging in contracts to do the construction. I'm just trying to figure out timing on it. It seems to me that we could probably tap into some of the contingency if that was warranted, if we had that need before the next session. Or would it be better, and I just would appreciate the two of your thoughts, would we be better to then just plan on some sort of supplemental appropriation to address the needs, and we could base that on what the studies reveal? What are you guys' thoughts?
Yeah, but on that, Representative Larson, so a question for Jake and the staff with the level 1, level 2, and I'm glad you brought up the needs of the agencies. Obviously one of the ones that we looked at that it wouldn't facilitate due to the lack of storage was the state engineer's office, where they have to have storage for vehicles and snow machines and other stuff. So that would be part of some place that additional storage construction build out on the site in addition to the offices. So I want to make sure that we capture that. There were some discussions with DCI and secure evidence storage and things like that, if that's a possibility. The question I have, Jake, and for Dale and with you guys, and so when we look at the level 1, level 2, and I'm trying to answer your question, Representative Larson, can we look at a phased approach and build that actually in and have two alternatives? One is we're going to do it all at once, and the level 1, level 2 comes out and says, okay, at level 3, we're going to do the entire build out. What's that cost? And as an alternative, say, okay, here's an alternative to the immediate building, then the outbuilding, and the parking lots. And this could be phased in over a 4 to 6 year period. And I'm thinking about from a budgetary standpoint to be able to evaluate those alternatives, because typically until we get to next year and know what our Craig forecast is, what the availability of funds, the likelihood of coming back with a one-time $12 to $14 million budget request may be a little too big, but how does that fit into a phased approach? In other words, what's the number one priority as far as phasing that budget in? And so we may be in a position kind of like the proposal that you give us already, looking at this is just immediate needs. This is kind of a temporary build out or a secondary build out, and then this is the all in. So if we do the level 1, level 2, can we incorporate those into two alternatives to look at from a budgetary standpoint?
Jake?
Senator Hicks, absolutely. I mean, we can look at it however you want. That's going to be the beauty of getting the level 1, level 2 done. We can give them direction on how we want it put together. Obviously phase the priorities of what needs to be taken care of first, and then look at it. And that was kind of what I was getting at in the very beginning, sir, was where we do a level 1, level 2 study of the entire building, but also master plan the entire site.
Yeah.
Have that included as part of the RFQ, RFP solicitation for the design team. We'll already be ahead of the game because of the due diligence that we're doing. So they'll know what they can and can't do on that site based on the geotag and the survey that we've already gotten done. They'll be able to accurately cost estimate with a third-party cost estimator what the different phases, and we could ask them to put it together in a phase package. And we can, so when we have the level 1, level 2 completed, we could say, this is phase 1, this is phase 2, this is phase 3. Or you could look at it as an entire package.
So to answer your question, Lloyd, I think that, it looks to me like the recommendation would be to use any of the contingency funds for the level 1, level 2. And the master plan at this point in time was at $500 and some thousand. And then once we get that information, I think then we can make a decision whether we want to chase the entire appropriation for a one-time through the supplemental or to phase this thing in. But I guess that's the process and the timeframes I think would work for that to happen if we would have the level 1, level 2 back in 6 months, evaluate those prior to JAC meeting in December, and then maybe have a recommendation for JAC based on that report.
So going back to Don's comments on the July SBC meeting is where recommendations for the governor to put his budget together, maybe we would consider a placeholder. Okay, Bob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Senator Hicks to open it up that way. And what we need to do is just make sure we contract so that theoretically we could have a report by mid-December.
Okay. Dale and Andrew, does that kind of help you understand? And, you know, in my mind, it would seem that you'd want to take care of the office space being a top priority. Storage would almost be number two, and then parking lot and amenities around the outside kind of follow in under that. Could almost come in under, some of that could almost then come in under major maintenance as we shift into some of that.
It does.
Al, are you
Yeah,
saying
it does, Mr. Chairman. One other thing that we haven't talked about, but I'm sure A and I would be interested in, is in this phased approach, we also need to take a look at the current folks that are in the building, including, I think there's a couple of private sector people that are renting that out. And so what would that look like for lease agreements to move them out? You know, we've got current state employees in the building, so driver's license, for example, so we'd have to find a spot for them while we were phasing in the construction and doing that. So that's another thing that we all need to keep our eyes on, is what do we do with the folks that are in there right now while we're doing the rest of this work, or the phasing timing, depending on what's going on. So,
Well, and I think from the task force point of view, we had always, you know, there had been some talk that we vacate the whole building and do it all at once. And I just don't think that that's the right approach. I think you're going to have to, because of the cost of lease space and finding lease space. So we're going to have to figure out a way to renovate while we at least, you know, have the building somewhat occupied. And then I think that once we've kind of done this due diligence thing, I think it's only fair to the non-state lessees to inform them that by maybe the end of the year or something, that their office space isn't going to be available anymore. But give them some time, some room to get out. But we're going to be using the entire space. So I hope that we can, Andrew, I think that probably fall into you all's place. Is anybody seeing that differently than I am? So then I guess the motion that I would entertain, task force members, is that we recommend to the Department of Construction and A&I, to whoever that falls into, that we move forward with level 1, 2, and 3 study, and that we also make a recommendation to the SBC for at least a placeholder amount for the renovation for the, so that the governor can include that in his budget, that then we can finalize, kind of like we do on the DD preschools. We can, in December, maybe we can refine that, but at least we'd have a placeholder.
Second on that motion.
Okay. Any task force members? I mean, the legislators have been sitting here, Christie, Curtis and Curtis. Any thoughts or comments you guys have? Okay.
So
let's just, well, that's those in favor of that motion on, and so that's two motions. One is that we authorize level 1, level 2, level 3 studies, and the other is that we get with Department of Construction and A&I and figure out a reasonable placeholder for SBC. So
not to, as part of that motion, I presume, Lloyd, that what we would do is have SBC or Department of Construction put together a draft motion, or basically an outline of what that level 1, level 2 would look like. And I would think that they would present that to the chairs to make sure it covered the contingencies that we talked about and the full span of it. I think the level 3 ought to include the cost of going forward if we go do it all at once, because if you look at the numbers that they just showed us earlier, we went from 12 million to 15 million by waiting to 2006, 26 or 27. And so all those numbers need to be kind of reassimilated. And then as they craft it, just to to provide the option of the most economical way to go forward in time-wise. And then also then readdress the 5 million, 8 million, 12 million issues. So we have those updated numbers.
Does that make sense, Dale?
It does, Mr. Chairman. We can do
And,
that.
and let's, please, I don't think I think Chairman Hicks and I were of the same mindset, but we really do want to include constructing over there in one of those lots, pre-engineered building that we can have into individual storage spaces for the agencies that they need, such as the state engineer's office and DCI and others for some of that. So I don't know that we were as clear as we should have been on that for Jake as they was doing the master plan, but now as we start working towards these level 1, 2, and 3 studies, let's just make sure that that's included, please. Okay, those in favor of that motion as amended by Chairman Nicholas, raise your hands. Come on, Inman, are you going to raise your hand? Yeah, I know your boss. Those opposed, if any. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, when we get our level 1, 2, and 3 drafted, we'll just send that over to LSO and they can distribute it to all the members to take a quick look at, make sure that, more eyes on it, the better. And
Okay.
one of the things that I'm going to ask our staff to do is make sure in the plan of that and the sequencing, they take into account the folks that are in the building now and how that might be sequenced out. And we'll work with A&I to figure out, what that might look like for being able to place, if we go into a full reno versus a partial rental and the different options, what that looks like for trying to find space for those state agencies that are currently in the building.
Okay. And then, Andrew, could we ask you to please follow up on that, those parcels across the road and kind of give us a feel for what's going on there. And if, finding out who the owner is really easy. You just go to the county clerk and, right. And then let's see if we can't approach those people. I think we'll regret not getting those. And so let's, if you report back. So,
Mr. Chairman.
yes.
I just wanted to add, Mr. Chairman, I did get some additional information from Mr. Simpson, who had talked to the realtor for the former owners. And she knows who the new owner is, and it sounds like there may be an opportunity to work with them to try and purchase it. So I did get that additional information. The other thing I also, he wanted me to mention was that we have, as far as moving as fast as we can on this, we've already provided a draft contract of our normal buy-sell contract to the current owners of the U.S. Energy Building so that they can start reviewing that.
Good. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for that update as well. Mr. Richards, is there anything here that you can see that we're missing on helping this whole effort to move forward? And then I'd ask the same of, if I may follow up after Don, Chairman Nicholas, from our role, if there's something we're missing here, please. Don, please go ahead.
Acting Chair, I did have 2 comments just to provide additional guidance or clarification for SCD in the preparation of their level 1, 2, and 3. Last year, the task force had tentatively taken DCI off the table and had anticipated that they would remain in their current location pursuant to their preference. I understand Mr. Waldock is not here representing them, but I wanted to see if that was still the case or whether the task force wanted to contemplate moving them. And then secondly, there was also some discussion today about the state engineer. That's a little different issue, but again, last year's task force contemplated that the state engineer personnel would not be moving to this facility.
Correct. And so for the committees, nothing has changed with DCI. The intent is for them to stay up by the airport. We don't have room in the existing square footage at that location. And Jack, I see your hand up. I'll get right with you here. But we don't have room, so they'll stay there. The state engineer's office would like to stay there, but they're in need of storage space. Their current little shed out there is chucked full, and it's kind of a regional place there in Riverton, and so that's the important reason behind the metal building. There's a conversation with the state engineer location and the Board of Parole that one of those could then possibly, if we had storage space in place at the U.S. Energy facility, that one of them could move into the state-owned Workforce Services building that will be vacated as that agency moves into the U.S. Energy building. And so there's some movement that'll take place. It'll kind of have to be finalized as we visit with these, Dawn, if that makes sense. Mr. Morey, you got your hand up.
Thank you, Acting Chair. Yes, and your last little synopsis there's the way I was understanding it. There's not enough space in the all those proposed options for state engineer's office, so they were to remain in their existing building, and we were hopeful for some storage at the new facility when available. Is that and that's exactly what you said. That's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Yes, and Jack, if you would too, if you could have your staff just go down and look at that Workforce Services building, and have them bear in mind that if we have storage space, and we'll create the storage space, if they weren't worried about storage space, would that square footage there work for them? Yeah. And that would be helpful in helping us make a decision.
Yeah. Acting Chair, if that's the building that we have went and looked at, I think Superintendent Frederickson looked at it with you. The one other concern, not only storage, was secure parking. If you recall, we have a significant amount of inventory we have to store in our pickups, and there was not secure parking.
Yeah, but we also felt that could be remedied easy enough, major maintenance on some fencing, but but your point's well taken.
Thank you. As long as we can find some convenient storage and the secure parking concern is remedied, we're open to whatever we can do. So,
thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, and I think that's the component of the master plan. And if we acquire those adjacent properties, and even I think it would, if we had acquired those and had the secure storage. I remember the discussion with DCI as they need a very secure evidence storage component and stuff, and if that's something that could actually be incorporated onto if we acquire those adjacent properties too. So I think basically the characterization is we need the master plan, and those agencies need to be involved in saying, look, if you can do this, then we can put our offices over here. We have our vehicle storage, our storage evidence lockers, whatever we need. I just don't want to forego the opportunity as we put the master plan together, because before the discussions were just the building, and that needs to be incorporated into that potential master plan and discussion with those agencies.
Sure. Point well taken. Are there any other actions that we need to take? Have we clarified everything for you all?
I believe you do, and we will circulate the motion, particularly to co-chairman Oakley, who is not present today, and of course, Chairman Hicks. If the committee or task force would want to provide an indication of when the next opportunity you would like to meet, if you wanted to meet after property.
Mr. Chairman, Acting Chairman Larson, sorry to bust in there. I do have a couple of potential dates that might be interesting for you to meet at. Before the July SBC meeting, there's Monday, the 8th.
We lost you, Catherine.
Excuse me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can hear you too.
As well.
Representative Larson?
There you are.
Okay. Sorry to barge in. I just was going to propose some dates that might be of interest to the task force. Before the SBC meeting on July 10th, there is Monday, July 8th, and you could have another morning meeting before the SBC. But also, if we were looking 4 to 6 months out, that would put us about September to November time period. If you wanted to do later in November, there are a couple of options as well. That would be November, Friday the 15th. There's also November, Monday the 4th. And I can, of course, send this in a follow-up email with some suggestions.
So
But-
I guess my question on that, Catherine, back to the folks is, I'm kind of the position that we've taken care of the decisions that SBC in July will need to address. Unless I'm missing something, it seems that maybe later on in the year is more appropriate. Larry and Bob.
Yeah, unless something pops up, I think you're correct.
So, Catherine, let's look at those later dates, September-ish, from September on, please.
Absolutely.
And we can kind of coordinate with the Director McComey's office to see what seems reasonable, kind of based on maybe after the RFPs have been, that the awards have been made on these level 1, level 2, and level 3 design stuff. That might influence a better time to meet. So, okay. Mr. Chairman, you're okay with that? Chairman Hicks, this is your, sorry. Sorry.
You're doing a good job. I would say let's, rather than actually, until we can get a firm date on when the level 1, level 2, level 3 report is available. Once you guys let a contract on that, we've got a firm date, then what we'd want to do is meet after that to review that document. And so I don't know if you guys can, with the SBC or the State Construction Department, can give us a firm date as to when you would expect that document to be available for the task force. So I'm inclined to say until we know that, it's kind of premature to actually set up a meeting if we don't have anything to review.
Well, I kind of wonder if that is the second or the third meeting, Chairman Hicks. I think there may be a need once we get the RFP out and back to just make sure that we understand what the master plan is going to include and what it is that they're going to be looking at in case we have to amend what we've asked them to do. And then I completely agree. The most important one would be once we get the reports back to review that and make recommendations on appropriations. So give us some choices, Catherine, okay?
Acting Chair, absolutely. I can send that in a follow-up.
Okay. Is there anything outstanding? Andrew, have we left you in the lurches here at all? You okay?
Chairman, I think we've covered all the things I was going to mention. I guess just one thing for the task force is, to be aware of, in addition, is we're also going to be working on coming up with our finalizing everything to be able to take over operation of the building upon purchase, including contracting out for custodial and building management and landscaping. And we will also be evaluating what potential supplemental budget requests we might need to bring to help fund that. We'll of course be working with state construction as we figure out that timeline of who will be in the building at what times, and that sort of thing. So we'll take all that into account as we work on it. But we are in the process during this 90 days. We're going to be working on getting contracts in place so we can have a seamless transition of control and operation of the building.
Thank you. Director McComey, anything else from your crew, Suzanne, and Jake and Dave?
Not on our side, Mr. Chairman. I think we're good.
Okay. Mr. Moffett, let's get that building, let's get that Honor Farm stuff cleaned up and done. That'll be a big coup for us, please.
We're on the way, I think.
Good. Curtis, Inman, you guys have that whole upstairs there. Just kind of be, there'll be some rearranging and kind of be, we certainly want your input. So kind of be looking at how we do that and reduce the number of those conference rooms, but yet provide you some and have a break room, but then provide more office space. So.
Absolutely, Representative. Absolutely.
And I think we have some rudimentary drawings. We might share that with them to where they, anything along that line. Christy, is that okay with you?
Yes.
Acting Queen Bee for DFS today.
Sam Larson sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Have we missed anybody have any other comments? Jack, we got everything squared around with State Engineer's Office. So
Acting Chairman Larson, this is Don Richards, just for to dot the i's and cross the t's. You do have public comment. No one has signed in, and we are live here in the Capitol, and no one is attending. Thank you.
Okay, we'll open it up for public comment. Going once, going twice, 3 times, and in public comment. Thank you for my catching my oversight of that. So with that, I think this meeting with Chairman Oakley has got out of court and is able to join us, and Senator Hicks, with your blessing, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Richards. Catherine, thank you. You butted in very good on Mr. Richards. We were very impressed.
Thank you.
See you later. Thank you all.